everyone. Thank you for taking the time to our presentation. We're VibraNerd, one of the two teams collaborating with a neurologist from UCSF, Dr. Merced. As a team, we strive to create a device that will quantify vibration perception threshold in peripheral neuropathy patients. My name is Phoebe Guan. I'm the team lead.
I'm Reed. I'm the Chief Technology Officer.
I'm Jasmine Nguyen. I'm the Safety Officer.
Forrest Ye, the Chief Medical Officer.
I'm Kevin Martinez, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer.
So would anyone like to take a guess at what the second leading cause of accidental death is in the world? Anyone?
Forgetting anniversaries.
Well, so the first leading cause is car accidents, but the second leading cause is actually falling. And the World Health Organization tells us that people older than 65 years old are at the highest risk for this accidental death. And several research journal studies tell us that one of the main causes that this happens is because people develop peripheral neuropathy. Now, when we say peripheral, we're talking about the extremities, so away from the core of your body. That means your arms and your legs, and especially your hands and your feet. And when we say neuropathy, we're talking about nerve damage. So peripheral neuropathy is when you have nerve damage in your extremities. Now, some of the things that will cause peripheral neuropathy are alcohol, tobacco, old age, and also diabetes. And actually 70% of diabetics end up developing signs and symptoms of peripheral neuropathy. Now, when you develop peripheral neuropathy, you begin to lose a couple of senses, mainly your senses of pain, vibration, and temperature. And it's this loss of sensation that causes people to have dangerous falls and also may cause them to develop an ulcer and eventually require an amputation.
An estimated of 20 million people in the United States have some form of peripheral neuropathy, according to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes. Using a large U.S. commercial claims database, a study estimated the associated economic burden of peripheral neuropathy as it is shown on this graph. The total financial burden came out to be a little over $300 million, which comes from visits from hospitals, the ER, doctor's office, and pharmacy claims. These aren't the only financial burdens that peripheral neuropathy can cause. Ulcerations and amputations can be consequences from not detecting peripheral neuropathy early on. Foot ulcerations can be quite expensive. Each ulceration episode can cost up to $4,500 and proceed to 84% of diabetes-related amputations. In addition, amputations can be quite costly. Not only do you lose the limb, but according to medical journals, a foot or leg amputation can cost between $30,000 to $50,000 in initial hospital costs, and between $43,000 to $60,000 in follow-up care for the next 3 years. Furthermore, multiple studies reported that the quality of life of patients with major amputations decreases by 50%. Even those with diabetic foot disease, but without amputations, tend to have a quality of life similar to those with recurrent cancer.
So let's say you're part of one of these high-risk populations and you want to see if you're starting to develop peripheral neuropathy. What do? How do they diagnose it? Well, when you go to the physician's office, they'll usually conduct what's called the tuning fork test, which involves taking a 128 Hz tuning fork, striking it against the surface, and then making contact with the location on the patient's skin to see if they can feel the vibration there. But this test has been used for the past 300 years, and new research on the types of nerves that give us our sense of vibration tells us that we need to control for the frequency, the amplitude, and the pressure. And the tuning fork test just can't do that. It only vibrates at one frequency, 128 Hz. After you strike it against the surface, its amplitude will slowly fade away, and there's no way to control for how much pressure a physician is pressing against the patient. The device that we're going to present to you all today is a vast improvement of this outdated technique. And we believe that it is financially feasible and can benefit the medical world.
So our goal is to create a device that will quantify the range of values a person can feel, and this would be the vibration perception threshold. By measuring frequency, pressure, and amplitude, we can then generate these 3D surface plots to assess neuropathy. After collecting many data, we can then run regression analysis to set standard values that a physician can use to distinguish between a healthy patient versus a patient who suffers from nerve damage. These values then can be used on a worldwide scale level and allow consistency through different physicians in different clinics, and will allow a quantification of the neuropathic degree, so you would know if you have a rate of progression or if you have a decrease in the progression of your disease.
So as we mentioned earlier, what sets our device apart from the tuning fork test is the ability to quantify vibrational sensitivities in a peripheral neuropathy patient. The range of frequencies that our device is able to operate at is from 2 to 2,000 hertz, and the total diagnosis time will take no longer than 3 minutes. The cost of our device will be less than $300, and the pressure range will be from 5 to 1,000 kilopascals. And this is obtained by having multiple head types that we'll talk about later on in our presentation. The device will also be user-friendly with a touchscreen interface, allowing users to control the device within the palm of their hands. It will also be easy to sterilize with just antibacterial wipes, and also have a descending and ascending amplitude to allow for control over intensity.
So here we are today with a device we call the VibraNerve CS17. And let's take a quick moment to dissect our device. First, it is controlled by a Bluetooth microcontroller and powered by a 4400 milliamp hour LiPo battery, along with a couple of voltage regulators. It is charged through a Qi charging wire, normally found within cell phones and tablets, so that the charging station can be cross-compatible. And as a user, and also we incorporated a battery management system along with 2 power switches. And later Jasmine would explain the reason behind that. And for user interface, we incorporated a 2.8-inch colored touchscreen, and we programmed it to be user-friendly and required minimal training. And lastly, we also have a small handheld Bluetooth trigger, and a trigger within our device, so that either the patient or the physician can record the responses. Earlier on, we mentioned 3 variables that we opt to control for, and their frequency, amplitude, and frequency. So as for frequency and amplitude, we use a service transducer along with a 20-watt amplifier. And a service transducer is very much like a speaker, except without the cone. So instead of creating vibration in the air, we create vibration on a patient's skin. And to control our very last variable, pressure, we use a pressure sensor behind an array of different heads, ranging from 5 millimeters square to 1,000 millimeters square. This design is extremely simple to use and versatile. We could easily sell injection molded and disposable heads that's tailored to a client's need. And for prototyping, we decided to use 3D printed heads that we cover with protective filming, and that we sterilize before each usage. And since pressure is just force over area, we can determine our last variable by dividing the area of the head that we chose over by the pressure value from the sensor. And as a special request, and different variable pressure heads is a special request by our client, Dr. Merced, in order to conduct later researches on whether the area can affect peripheral neuropathy.
So here's a quick overview of how to use our device. First, you turn it on with the 2 switches, and you'll see a loading screen appear. Once the main menu shows up, you can select which program you want to run, Here we're running one that increases the frequency to detect the vibration perception threshold. To keep the Alright, so again, we turn it on with our two switches, and you'll see a loading screen appear. And once this loading screen is done, you'll see the main menu where you can select your program. This one is doing an increasing frequency to detect the vibration perception threshold. And to keep the test from being subjective, our patient will wear noise-canceling headphones, and responses will be recorded with either the Bluetooth remote or trigger on the handle.
So even though we're confident in the circuitry and the design of our device, we incorporated several safety features since it is intended for medical purposes. First, we sealed our entire device so that it is easy to sterilize, and also so that it can charge with the wireless inductive charging. And this also eliminates the risk of electrical shock due to exposed wires. You can also see in the animation on the right that you can easily sterilize the device using an antibacterial wipe on the head. And as an extra precaution for the safety of our patient and the user, we incorporated two switches on the device, one acting as a master on switch and the other switch acting as a direct line to the battery, known as the fail-safe switch. And this fail-safe switch controls and isolates the riskiest part of our device, which is the lithium polymer battery. So knowing that our device is safe is crucial, but we also conducted 3 tests to ensure that our device is working the way that we want it to. And first, we had analyzed the structural integrity of our plastic casing. And we did so by creating a simulation using SolidWorks. And in this simulation, we mimicked a physician applying 10 newtons of force on a patient. And this is the maximum force that our force sensor can register. Our results showed that not only can our device withhold this amount, it can actually surpass it. And it also showed that the reactive force is centralized within the crux of the user's hand, which is a very ergonomic way to control the fatigue.
Our second analysis was to confirm that the transducer output is uniform with the oscilloscope, which measures frequency. So we set our transducer to 128 Hz, same as a tuning fork, and use a sensing transducer with oscilloscope to measure that the output is the correct frequency that we want, which confirmed was 128 Hz. So then our third analysis was to then confirm and compare the 3 different waveform generator, the tuning fork, and the CS17. The waveform generator outputs a perfect 128 waveform frequency, so that would be our reference and our control. And by using an accelerometer, which measures, it's a sensor that measures acceleration, we then collected data of the tuning fork at 128 Hz and our CS17 at 128 Hz. You can see in the graph above that the CS17 had a similar waveform compared to the waveform generator, as the tuning fork outputted some skewed data that caused a percent error in the larger standard deviation. The percent error was 3 times as much as our CS17. Thus, our CS17 is an improvement of a diagnostic tool for neuropathic patients, and we hope to upscale this to the medical market.
So the medical device market is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, with half of it contributed by the US alone. But just because this industry expects large costs doesn't mean that we ignored financial efficiency. In fact, we managed to bring down our original prototype costs from $260 all the way down to just $64 if we were to scale up this production by 21,000 units. Most of this reduction is due to creating our own electrical components using our own printed circuit boards, and also due to bulk pricing. We analyzed 3 main markets concerned with our device: general consumers, healthcare providers, and potential investors. If we were to sell this device at $200 MSRP or the manufacturer's suggested retail price, investors can earn up to 68% profit margin for markup. We expect our device to last about 10,000 tests, and this is based off the battery life. If physicians earn $64 for a foot exam, and this is not including the physician time, we conclude that purchasing one device can lead up to a net profit of $500,000. Naturally, if a patient suspected that they had neuropathy, they should probably see a physician since their conditions might worsen. But since our device is so easy to use, we intend our device to enter into the general consumer market as well, just to give them peace of mind and make sure that their symptoms aren't worsening. Based on a patient's copay of about $21, they can expect to get their money's worth after just 10 tests.
The return on investment is calculated by the following equation. It is characterized by the gain and the loss of conducting, the cost of conducting our test. The gain is the sum of the Medicare reimbursement plus the patient's copay multiplied by the lifetime of the device. In the case of performing a foot exam in a facility, the Medicare reimbursement would come up to about $26, and the copay would just be 80% of that. As mentioned earlier, the lifetime of our device is approximate to 10,000 tests. 10,000 tests. Therefore, the lifetime gain of our device would come about just short of $500,000. On the other hand, the cost of our device comes to $200. And then once all the variables are plugged into our equation, we concluded a return of just over 200,000% for the lifetime of the device. The VSA3000 is our most similar competitor. However, it does lack the unique features that the CS17 provides, which are its affordability and the ability to change the frequency. The VSA3000 costs a whopping $7,900 and can only be set to 2 different frequency values, whereas our device only costs $200 and can theoretically run up to 20,000 different frequencies. Not only that, the VSA3000 is intended to be stationary, while our device can fit in a compact carrying case and comes with a stationary charging station, which can be mounted on the wall since hospitals tend to not have a lot of desk space. On this graph, we compare the return on investment for our device to the VSA3000 through the usage duration all the way to their lifetime. Both return on investments were calculated using the equation mentioned before, and the values used were when a physician conducts a foot exam in a facility and conducts 3 tests a day, 5 times a week.
So what we have just shown you is a device that can detect neuropathy by vibration. And our device satisfied the constraints that were given and even went above and beyond with the ranges of frequency. And it is also financially sound towards 3 different markets and also packed full of features, making it versatile for future research studies. But our study doesn't just end here. Next, we're going to conduct a research study with UCSF Fresno with real patients. We'll be conducting research with 20 healthy patients and 20 patients with neuropathy, and in order to assess the efficiency of our device. And
So let's take a moment to compare our story to another common medical device, the blood pressure cuff. When they first created the blood pressure cuff, it allowed physicians to finally quantify blood pressure. And once they were able to quantify blood pressure, they were able to define people as having ranges of high blood pressure or hypertension. And once they were able to define these ranges, they were able to start creating new treatments for this disease like beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. Because peripheral neuropathy has no reliable treatments right now, this is the vision that we as a team have for our device. We think that this device can contribute greatly to the medical field, and we believe that it will unlock new understanding about peripheral neuropathy and the human body in general. Thank you.
We'd like to give a huge shout out to Dr. Merced and our fellow Capstone faculties. And at this point, we'll be opening the floor to questions and suggestions.
One of the problems that you have with the tuning fork is the pressure that the operator would use. How do you control the pressure for this device?
So within the device, we have a pressure sensor.
There's a pressure sensor, and then on the screen it has a value range on red and green, and you want to stay within the green to maintain that constant pressure.
Right. So right under the different changeable heads, and that would give us, like, as we said, what is a good range and what is not.
You guys mentioned generating graphs of like amplitude and frequency. How do you export the data from your handheld device to like the computer, or is that like you can only see on the computer screen on the device?
Yeah, so inside of the device, there's actually a micro SD card that's expandable, and you can save them as text files or CSV files, and then you can just export that straight into Excel. It's really easy to use. Right now, the whole device was designed to be developer-friendly. So we have a sight glass on the side so you can get easy access to the actual microcontroller by USB port. There's also actually an auxiliary input, because if a clinician wanted to conduct their own study with their own set of frequencies, they can just plug in with their own expensive waveform generator and use the transducer to output those. But then the SD card was also part of that, so you can collect and store it.
So for the tuning fork, is there a reason why they're testing it at the frequency, what was it, 128? Yeah, is there a reason why the tuning fork is set at 128 hertz?
The tuning fork can only produce 120 hertz, but it's unknown if the other frequencies have an effect. So we want to create a device so then we could use for research purposes and then clinician purposes to then see do frequency values also assess the nerve damage. So instead of only testing one frequency, you could see can they feel high frequencies, low frequencies, and then you could assess if it's a small fiber nerve damage or a large fiber nerve damage. You would have like more of a quantitative thing than just you're limited to one frequency. Can you feel that? Can you not?
Correct, but then like, why don't they have a tuning fork that's at a different hertz? At a different frequency? I mean, can you design another tuning fork that let's say spits out a different frequency?
Yeah. Do you want to go back to the mission slide where we have the surface plot? So they do have multiple frequency tuning forks, like 256 and
Correct.
111, that they use for different tests. But as you can see, if we were to scale along the frequency, it varies throughout your perception of that specific frequency, and that's due to the types of neurons that are actually registering for those frequencies. But because it's so variable with patients, rather than carrying around a briefcase of basically 20,000 tuning forks, you could have this one device that can just vary.
And in addition to that, we also mentioned earlier that after you whack the tuning fork and place it on the patient's ankle or wherever that we're testing, eventually it would fade away. So if the patient doesn't respond within the time span, you kind of don't know that if they're actually responding to 128 hertz or whatever lower range that
Due
the
to the
tuning fork is
inconsistent
at.
amplitude that was shown on the graph, that it starts to decrease, and then you're not getting 120 at that point. You don't know what you're getting.
Actually, so kind of part of that, it seemed like the major selling point of your device is the range of frequencies that it can address. But then you also say that it is really no research that kind of suggests that different ranges can be useful in diagnosis. Like,
Well,
nothing. And it sounded like there has to be something, because there's another product that also tests at different ranges. Like, really there's something more than just nothing about that sort of thing.
So there is research showing that it does correlate, but they don't know what frequency range, right? So they always stick to the 128 as their standard value. So this kind of gives off now clinicians to then know, does it increase, do they feel an increase, do they feel a decrease, do they feel this one value? So it allows for more quantification than just limiting to yourself to only one value and one sweep. And this also broadens the knowledge on neuropathy, because before they only thought it was, can you feel it or not? And now it's like, what can you feel really? What frequency, what value? And then using that value then to create plots instead of standard value to know, okay, what level of damage now do you have? Because it's a progressive disease, right? So you want to catch it on before it gets really bad. And maybe if you feel values before it gets really bad, that's when we can start to assess and do preventive measurements, since there's no treatments right now, to decrease the progression of your nerve damage.
Well, that's kind of the question. At different severities, do you lose sensitivity to different frequencies, or is that not known, but there's current research where they're trying to figure out?
Yeah, this current research is trying to figure out, so that's why we want to do our clinical studies to start to see the values and test our hypothesis of, yes, these values do correlate to nerve damage.
Have you guys ever gone head-to-head with the other device that's really expensive? Like as far as perception, do patients have the same perception with your device as they do with the expensive device? Is that something that you?
So the expensive device, as mentioned earlier, was $7,800, and we're given a limited budget, and so the only thing that we tested against is the tuning fork. We also had a sample of skin biopsy that we did not mention in this slide that also assessed peripheral neuropathy, but that's also very expensive and painful as well. So to answer your question, no, we did not. But if we get a chance to, we definitely will.
Thank you. Next is TMI sensor.
Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to our presentation, and thank you for taking the time to come here. We're Nerve, currently one of the two teams collaborating with Dr. Merced, a neurologist from UCS Fresno. As a team, we're working to create a device that will quantify vibration perception threshold in peripheral neuropathy patients. My name is Phoebe Guan, I'm the team lead.
I'm Jasmine Nguyen, I'm the safety officer,
And I'm Forrest Jay, the Chief Medical Officer.
and the rest of our team is at Innovate to Grow down at the gym.
So, would someone like to take a guess at what the second leading cause for accidental death in the world is? Someone that was maybe on our last presentation? Well, so the first leading cause is from car accidents, but the second leading cause is actually from falling. And the World Health Organization tells us that people over 65 years old are at the highest risk for this accidental death. And several medical studies tell us that this is mainly due to peripheral neuropathy. Now, when I say peripheral, I'm talking about anything away from the core of your body. That's your extremities, your arms and your legs, and especially your hands and your feet. And when I say neuropathy, I'm talking about nerve damage. So peripheral neuropathy is when you have nerve damage in your extremities. Some of the things that cause peripheral neuropathy are alcohol, smoking, old age, and diabetes. And actually, 70% of diabetics end up with signs and symptoms of peripheral neuropathy. Now, when you develop peripheral neuropathy, you begin to lose some senses, mainly your sense of pain, vibration, and temperature. And it's this loss of sensation that causes you to accidentally develop ulcers that may require amputations or have a dangerous fall. So let's say you have neuropathy or you're in one of these high-risk groups and you want to see if it's worsening or if you have it at all. What do? How do you get it diagnosed? Well, when you go to the physician's office, they'll usually conduct what's called the tuning fork test, which involves taking a 128 hertz tuning fork, striking it against the surface, and then making contact with a location on the patient's skin, usually their fingers or their toes. And that tells you if they can feel vibration in that area. But this test is 300 years old. And new research on the types of nerves that give us our sense of vibration tell us that we need to control for the frequency, the amplitude, and the pressure. And the tuning fork test just doesn't do that. The tuning fork only vibrates at one frequency, 128 hertz. Its amplitude slowly fades away after you strike it on the surface, and there's no way to control for how much pressure a physician is pressing against the patient's skin. The device that we're about to present to you is a vast improvement on this old technique, and it can help really understand peripheral neuropathy.
So our goal is to create a device that will quantify the range of frequencies that a patient can feel, also known as the vibration perception threshold. If we collect the amplitude, pressure, and frequency of the vibrations that we deliver to a patient, we can generate surface plots such as one seen here. If we collect enough data, we can run a regression analysis and calculate the healthy range and the unhealthy range seen in peripheral neuropathy patients. This quantification allows practitioners to understand the level of nerve damage and assess the rate of progression seen in these types of patients.
So here we are today with the device that we call the VibroNerve CS17. So let's take a quick moment to dissect the components of this wireless device. First, it is controlled by a Bluetooth microcontroller and powered by a 44 500 milliamp hour LiPo battery, along with a few voltage regulators. And it is charged by a G charging wire, which is found in a lot of cell phones and tablets nowadays, so that the charging station is cross-compatible. Next, we have to ensure that the battery is always at its optimal level. We have a battery managed system, and the device is powered on with 2 power switches. And next, for our user interface, we employed a 2.8-inch touchscreen, and we programmed it to be user-friendly and require very minimal training. Lastly, as earlier on, we mentioned that there are 3 frequencies that we opt to control, 3 variables that we opt to control for to manipulate frequency and amplitude. We have a electromagnetic service transducer. So what an electromagnetic transducer is, it's very similar to a speaker. So except without the cone. So instead of creating vibration in the air, we create vibration on the patient's skin. And it also comes with a trigger and a Bluetooth and a mini Bluetooth controller so that either the patient or the physician can record the responses. And lastly, to control the last variable, pressure, we employed a pressure sensor, but beneath an array of different changeable heads that ranges from 5 millimeters squared to 1,000 millimeters squared. And since the design is extremely simple to use and versatile, so we can easily sell objection molded disposable heads that's tailored of any size and that's tailored to a client's need. And since pressure is equal to the force over area, we can easily calculate this loss variable by dividing the area of the head that we chose from the force sensor reading. And as a feature requested by our client, Dr. Merced, the reason why we created changeable heads is because this could lead to later research that further verify whether different contact sizes have an effect on peripheral neuropathy.
So here's a quick overview of how the device works. First, you power it on with the 2 switches located on the side, and it'll say a start menu beginning. Once the menu's shown up, you can select which program you want to run. Here we're running one called Frequency Sweep Up, which increases the frequencies. Go back. So, sorry about that. Again, you power it on with 2 switches. One's a failsafe, one's a master switch. And you can select from various programs on the main menu screen. Once you select, in this case, the frequency sweep up, you can begin diagnosing the test. To keep the test from being subjective, we have the patients wear noise-canceling earphones, and the results are recorded with a trigger and a Bluetooth button.
So the medical device market is actually worth hundreds of billions of dollars, with half of it contributed to the US alone. But just because this industry expects large costs doesn't mean that we didn't take into account financial efficiency. In fact, we managed to bring our original prototype cost of $260 all the way down to just $64 if we were to scale this up to 21,000 units. Most of this reduction is due to developing our own electrical components on our own circuit boards. And if we sold this device at $200 MSRP or the market suggested retail price, we can expect that the investors will have a profit margin of 68%. We expect our device to last about 10,000 tests based on the battery life. And since physicians can be paid up to $47 per foot exam, not including physician time, we estimate that the purchase of one device will lead to almost $500,000 in net profit. Naturally, if a patient suspected that they had neuropathy, or if they were a high-risk diabetic, they would go see a physician for follow-up care or instructions. But since our device is so user-friendly, we anticipate selling to the consumer market as well.
So what we have showed you all is a device that can quantify neuropathy by vibration. The device that is all the constraints given, and it went above and beyond with its frequency range. And it is also financially sound towards 3 different markets, and its versatile functionality can be very useful for future research studies. But the project doesn't just end here. Where we're going to take it next is a research study with human subjects at UC Fresno. So how does this work is we'll take 20 healthy patients and 20 neuropathy patients, and from that, we will assess how effective our device is. And if it all goes well, we'll proceed into conducting more studies on contact surface area.
So let's take a quick moment to look at the journey of our product with another very common medical device, the blood pressure cuff. So when that was first created, physicians were finally able to quantify blood pressure. And now that they were able to quantify blood pressure, they were able to set specific ranges for people that had high blood pressure or hypertension. And once they were able to define that, then they were able to start developing new treatments for the disease, like beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. Because peripheral neuropathy currently has no reliable treatments, this is the vision that we as a team have for our device. We believe that this device will unlock new understanding about peripheral neuropathy and the human body. Thank you.
At this point, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Dr. Merced, as well as UCSF Fresno for sponsoring our project, as well as our mentor, Rachel Hitano, and the Capstone faculty. And this concludes our presentation. We'll be taking questions.
You developed the electrical components. Can you say a little bit more about what was your design versus what you got off the shelf?
Yeah, so most of it was off-the-shelf parts because at the end of this, Dr. Stecker is going to end up with the device. So we wanted pieces that he would be familiar with, or at least be able to look up online, and with the assistance of our tutorials. Also, various components were chosen because there's actually many features in here. Like, for example, we have an amplifier, and there's an auxiliary port. If someone that wanted to conduct a study wanted to produce their own frequencies at their own amplitudes with their own expensive waveform machine, they can just plug in right here and use our transducer, the same setup. But some of those are consequences of off the shelf. The entire 3D casing we designed in SolidWorks, and we 3D printed it. We laser cut several components, and all of the wiring together was done by us. There's a lot of wiring.
Have any idea how many man-hours you spent?
So this Capstone project started in January, and so for the first third of the period, we created 3 different designs, and we eliminated to this final one. And then throughout the rest of the semester, we modified this and kind of perfected it and filled in all these hardware as well as software. So I would say we work
Over the span of the semester.
right.
There's more than the 4 credit unit.
So the testing that's going to be done on patients, are you going to actually stay on to perform that yourself?
So we've actually submitted an IRB, which is a standard that we have to obey by when we're testing on actual patients. And that's been submitted already, but we're probably going to have to wait another 3 or 4 months until we can come back and meet with our sponsor once again and test this out on the 20 neuropathy patients.
Right, actually, so our initial plan was actually complete this study before the end of semester. However, the IRB standard changed within this year, and so the whole process elongated by a whole lot, and so we were not able to get there even though we have completed the product.
With the external design having a lot of detail in it, you talked about the SolidWorks iterations that you went through. How did you decide on that as the final design? How much did that change from your initial?
Well, so if anyone got a chance to come out to our booth at Innovate to Grow, you could see some of the prototype iterations that we had. There's a lot of filament used, a lot of print hours. For example, just the handle portion was 10 hours. Each of these has about another 5. And this is version 3.4. That's including version 1.3, 2.6, and then 3.4. So each of these components were different. But the way that we designed it was all modular because if we were to injection mold this in the future, we're probably just going to have 2 halves that are injection molded, 1 printed board, super easy, and it'll reduce the cost, as you saw. But since we're prototyping and we were trying to figure out what components would fit best where, we did it all modularly, so we didn't have to print 20-hour pieces every time we wanted to make a small change.
Time for maybe 2 more questions.
Can you talk about the assumptions that you made when you were doing your calculations on the per unit price at the scaled up version?
Sure, yeah. So the per unit price on scaled up?
Yes.
So that, it's based mostly on electrical components, and a lot of them, the electrical components ended up taking about 20% of the cost off just there. Or actually, it reduced it by 4 times. And the battery also, we found a wholesale supplier that would actually reduce the cost significantly. The battery we're using in here, which is 4,400 milliamp hours, is actually much more than it needs to be. So we could reduce that cost even further.
One more question?
So in the back.
Okay, let's thank you.